Good evening and welcome to Anglia Tonight. Our programme dominated by the train crash at a level crossing on the Suffolk-Essex border. 21 people on board the train were injured. Tonight, one remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. The accident happened yesterday evening when the 1731 National Express service from Sudbury to Marks Tey crashed into an articulated tanker lorry on an unmanned level crossing just off the Bures Road south of Sudbury. The tanker driver was arrested at the scene. Well, coming up, we'll report on the coordinated rescue operation that took place here last night and find out more about the unmanned level crossing that's at the heart of this incident. But first, our correspondent Malcolm Robertson reports on the aftermath of the crash.
The full horror of what happened on this small branch line became very clear today. From the air we can see the extent of the damage caused by a train hitting a truck. Many are amazed that there were no fatalities. 20 passengers were on board the train that was travelling up to 60 miles an hour when it struck the lorry crossing the line at Little Cornard. All the passengers and the train driver were injured. Ian Bacon from Witham was one of those on board. He's a shop manager in Sudbury and was on his way home. His son Blake would normally have been travelling with him, but wasn't last night.
First impression was, OK, the braking, hitting it, and then the driver coming out and saying, brace yourself, we're going to hit something. And I didn't know whether it would hit a bridge. The train was wobbling from side to side, and I thought, we're goners here because it's going to turn over.
What happened on the Essex-Suffolk border last night sparked a full-scale emergency. Local hospitals were put on standby as the extent of the incident became clear. With the fear of fire from ruptured fuel tanks on both the truck and train, there were no fewer than 7 fire engines at the scene, and the air ambulance removed the most seriously injured. Ian Bacon was taken to hospital in Colchester with a cracked rib and damaged knee. Today he spoke about the moment of impact.
I remember seeing bits of metal flying past one side, which is obviously the truck, and then obviously all this sewage from this truck sort of like hit the complete train, and then there was that just almost a deadly silence.
Danny Crosby told me how he and his wife helped out with blankets. He was working nearby when he heard a bang. When he arrived, he feared the worst.
I thought there was people dead, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I couldn't believe that, you know, I'm so fortunate that if it hit the driver, if it had hit the cab, there would have been no chance for him.
At 17:31, the train left Sudbury Station on time, bound for Marks Tey. A few minutes later, south of the town, a lorry with a tanker full of sewage pulled out of the Anglian water treatment site onto a privately owned track. To join the main road, the driver had to cross the railway line. As he crossed the track at 17:35, the southbound train smashed into the lorry. The impact separated the tanker from the cab, leaving them on opposite sides of the track with the train in between. The truck driver, who's 38 and believed to be from Lithuania, was arrested and today has been helping police with their investigations. Drivers who use this crossing at Little Cornard are warned that they must phone railway staff to get clearance before attempting to cross the line. British Transport Police won't confirm reports that this driver failed to do that.
I'm not clear on that at the moment, and I don't think we will be clear until we've gathered all of that information, and it'd be wrong to speculate. There's a lot of technical data that needs to be gone through, and that will tell us exactly what was done or wasn't done.
Inevitably, what happened last night has raised questions about the level of safety at this crossing. For local people, it's been a concern for some time.
So there's been a lot of people that have tried to go across when a train has been coming or going, and they've been lucky they've only just got across.
Tonight, from those on board the train, tributes to the emergency services.
All the way through, the emergency services were brilliant from the conductress and obviously the driver, who sort of did his bit to try and stop people from getting hurt, through the firemen, through the paramedics, through the doctors that were there, through the ambulance drivers and the paramedics, and then when we got to Colchester, there seemed to be about 40 people working on it.
24 hours since the accident, the train and the main frame of the tanker remain exactly where they were at the point of impact. Tonight, heavy lifting gear will be brought in to begin the task of removing the wreckage from the track. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News
I'm
at
joined now
Little
by
Cornard.
Superintendent Jim Nattrass of the British Transport Police, who's been coordinating this operation. Thank you for joining us this evening, Superintendent. Can we break this down into 3 distinct areas? It's only when you get here you realise the actual scale of the operation, but take us through stage 1.
Well, stage 1 will have occurred immediately during the aftermath of the crash, where your primary concern is the safety of the people who've been involved in the incident. So it's about setting up with the joint agencies, making sure you're saving life and limb, people get the treatment they deserve. You categorise your injured people and they get to the more specialist centres that they're going to require.
It seemed to go well.
It went very well. The local community, local force, we had a very good turnout from the multi-agencies. So we got a lot of support here and a lot of support from the local community. So phase 1 went as well as can be expected in the light of a tragic crash like this.
Now, stage 2, you're moving on then into actually gathering the evidence.
Yeah, stage 2 is the criminal investigation side, where a lot of forensic examination will take place of the cab, of the train, of the instances surrounding it, of the run-up and the leading to. So it's a forensic examination which we've more or less done the majority of that kind of work now.
And if now we're into stage 3, we can hear it all around us as well, because the crane's about to be constructed for lifting off the train, and also the tank later on the ceiling. This is still a critical part of the operation.
It is. I mean, stage 3 is a very complicated business. It's a return to normality as we try to phase. I mean, the train behind us, you can see, it's a 65-ton unit. We're going to have to use a 500-ton crane to actually lift and facilitate and move, so we can actually get underneath and remove the tanker. There's a lot of activity takes place. We've had to cut down, as you can see, from the EDF power company we've been in, and have had to remove some overhead power cable so the train can remove. And
that's no easy measure. It's 11,000 volts pulsing through there.
There is, and again, the local community have had to put up with a fair bit of disruption, which we're really grateful for their support while we're getting these 3 enormous trucks in to let the company construct the train.
And of course, what we want to avoid is stage 4, which could be still an environmental disaster here on a smaller scale, but we have to make sure that the engineers are doing their work correctly to make sure that they lift the right part first.
Absolutely, it's vital we get it right. All agencies are here, from local authority and the council environmental agencies, making sure that we're doing it as expeditiously as possible, but also as correctly as possible, so not going to leave any lasting damage when the examination of the train is finally removed and taken away and the scene is returned back to its hopefully the state it was in before the incident happened.
Hopefully on Friday as well. That's the timescale we're hearing at the moment, isn't it?
We're hoping to have it done midday for tomorrow if all goes well, yes.
Superintendent, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. That's Superintendent Jim Nattrass of the British Transport Police. Well, last night was, without doubt, a challenging one for the emergency services, but a major incident like this is the sort of scenario they spend hours preparing for. Well, Tom Barton reports now on how the fire service and medical teams coordinated the rescue operation.
For all the emergency services, this is the sort of incident where years of training and planning come into play. The first job for firefighters was to make sure it was safe to work at the scene.
We need to make sure that the carriage itself is stable, and this was sort of our first and our main priority, because obviously this could introduce further hazards to the casualties and the rescue workers themselves.
A doctor was sent to the scene to triage or prioritise patients. The most serious were flown to hospital by air ambulance. Others were taken by road. All of the train's 20 passengers and the driver received some medical attention. The vast majority of the train's passengers were brought here to Colchester General Hospital. This was a major incident, and one which was inevitably going to test the hospital's emergency plans. Consultant surgeon Adam Howard saw some of the 17 patients who were brought through the hospital's doors last night.
6 of those were seriously ill. 1 patient was brought in by helicopter and required emergency surgery last night, and the other 5 patients were all treated according to the trauma guidelines, and they were all treated successfully and went CT scanned, and then were sent to the wards and observed overnight.
Extra staff were brought in, all part of a well-rehearsed plan to make sure the hospital was prepared for events like last night's crash.
We work out some scenarios, kind of take guess at what kind of casualties we get, and then we run it through and we get people to do like live tests where we actually put them through the process and we see what would come out of that. Did the system work well? Did it enable them to actually respond quickly and correctly to people? And did we also manage to deal with the impact it will have on the organisation?
There's no doubt that the scale of the task faced by emergency services last night was considerable, but the professional response shows that preparation pays. Tom Barton, Anglia News, Colchester.
Now, the crossing here, and it's just over there, literally just by going through the generator and on the other side, I think you can see it here. Now, it's called a user worker crossing. It's not automated, and its safe use depends heavily on how the competence of the people actually using them. In this case, it was a case of a phone call. They had to make a phone call to the actual railway to make sure that they could cross in safety. Now, Emma Baker's been finding out how easy and how safe these crossings are to use.
They're a common sight across our region. Every day, thousands of people use them to get from A to B. But is our daily reliance on level crossings a risk worth taking? Yesterday's crash happened at a crossing very similar to this one, with manual gates and a phone by the side. It's called a user-worked crossing. The idea is when you need to get across, you use the phone to talk to the local signaller. They will then check the line and give you permission when it's safe to cross. Once you're across the other side and you've closed the gates, you then call them back to let them know the line is clear again for rail use. Now, Network Rail insists that this type of crossing is safe, but only when used correctly. Figures show that 95% of all incidents that happen on level crossings are down to motorists or pedestrians' misuse or error. There are 312 user-worked crossings in our region. The majority are owned by private landowners. Network Rail say they have an ongoing programme to shut down these type of crossings, and last year they began the process of closing 400 across the country. Over the years, we've reported on many accidents and near misses on level crossings. Network Rail says replacing every level crossing would cost several billions of pounds. But rail unions say it's a price worth paying.
Network Rail really does make it a higher priority. There was a year or so back, there was a bit of a campaign that did involve Jeremy Clarkson, but it seems to have petered off. But the real problem is they need to spend money in eradicating level crossings.
Is it safe to cross? OK, thank you. One car. Bye.
But the owners of this one at Bramfield near Halesworth in Suffolk say it's essential for the running of their farm.
Railway lines are here, we're here, and we've got to live with them. You can't just close the crossing. Over half the farm is the other side of the crossing. If I've got cattle there, how do I get them back? Or crops or anything else? You've got to go round miles. We've just got to live with it.
Despite yesterday's incident, many still maintain that when used properly, these crossings are safe. The question being asked tonight is, could they be made safer? Emma Baker, Anglia News, Bramfield in Suffolk.
Well, for now, that's where we'll leave it. But join me again later on in the programme, and we'll look at how the latest stage of the operation is going to construct the cranes, which will in turn start lifting the train off the tracks at about midnight.
Jonathan, thanks very much.